Welcome to the Black Teacher Project podcast. My name is Dr. Misha Mosely. I'm the founder and executive director of the Black Teacher Project, and I'm excited to be joined today by a special guest doing great work in my hometown. Dr. Dena Simmons is the founder of Liberated, a collective focused on developing school-based resources at the intersection of social and emotional learning, racial justice, and healing. She's the former assistant director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, where she supported schools to use the power of emotions to create a more compassionate and just society. Prior to her work at the center, Dena served as an educator, teacher educator, diversity facilitator, and curriculum developer. She's been a leading voice on teacher education and has written and spoken across the country about social justice and liberatory pedagogy, diversity, and emotional intelligence. What I want to say is that Dena is an amazing human being, a profound thinker, and someone who we all should be listening to. So today we're going to explore what it looks like to tend to students' mental health needs through social emotional learning practices, and how a focus on healing in schools can benefit us all collectively. So let's get into it. What's going on, my
Let's
sister?
get into it. Let's get into it. What?
New York is in the house.
Yep. Don't get us started, because you know that after the next one, you can't tell us anything.
It's over. It's over.
So.
Yes. This we know. Well, speaking of New York, so you started your journey in New York with all the grit, the diversity, the vibrancy. How did your early years as an educator in New York shape your understanding of what students actually need to feel safe and seen beyond what's like in the standard curriculum?
So I started my career in the Bronx.
Okay, all right, here we go.
Every day.
All
right. So that's important. And I'm from the Bronx. So I actually taught in the borough that I'm from, in a neighborhood that I knew. So in some ways, teaching for me was a home return, a homecoming. And I was a sixth grade teacher for my first year of teaching, and I fell in love with my students. And I knew that I could not let go of them. And so I taught them in seventh grade, and then I taught them in eighth grade. So I had the fortune of looping with my students and developing deep relationships with my students and getting to know them, not just academically, but socially, emotionally, psychically, all the leads, you know what I mean? And what I learned from my students, I said most of what I know, I learned from my students. I learned from being their teacher, from them pushing back, from them, the feedback that they gave me. And I learned that relationships are key. I'm not saying anything that anyone hasn't said before, but our students, and you can't do anything without building trusting relationships, even with not only with the students, but with your colleagues, with the community, and with the families. I had their parents had to trust to have this same teacher for 3 years and ensure that I was going to love up on them. I was going to take care of them, ensure that they were whatever it is, what they needed to be successful. And so I learned that you couldn't just teach the child maths, for example, or EL, English language or arts, or whatever academic content, that you also had to teach students what it meant to ensure that someone doesn't get left out, for example. You had to teach by doing. I would tell my students, and you also had to give your students agency. I learned that how important students, especially I taught middle school, which is important. It's important as we think about education to understand the development stage our young people are in and work and meet them there and wherever they are that day. And so I remember telling my students, listen, y'all could choose wherever you sit. The only thing I'm saying is no one could be left out. Right. So one day I took them to Central Park and they were all playing a game and I was sitting by myself. And my students came to me. They're like, Miss Simmons, you can't be by yourself. And I was like, and I was like, that was it. Like that I was just a part of their community as another peer of theirs. And that to me was the moment where I was like, it's catching on, that all you had to do was give students their agency, give them create the conditions for them to feel free, for them to heal, and then to build the trust and to continue to build the trust, because sometimes it gets broken, right? And to sort of put in the time and intentionality with our students and play. I would go outside, as short as I am, and play basketball with my students. I would take them out to lunch. Like why are you laughing though? Like why are you
Because you are
laughing?
what? No, okay, all right. I don't want to get into the vertical situations, but basketball would not have been the sport I would have imagined. So
Well,
okay.
yes, I am 5. I'm inching toward 5'1". I'm almost there, but I am a good basketball player, okay? And I would play basketball with my students. I would take them to lunch. I would write them little love notes like Miss Simmons loves you. And we would do this thing where we would do warm fuzzies, which I learned from Posse. And I
Hmm.
brought it to my classroom, and my students would write, like we pick a day where everybody got a warm fuzzy. But actually, that helped me ensure that I was also paying attention to that. Like
Right.
sometimes there's students that you just forget to, like, for some reason, you're like, I
And
haven't even called on Randy all day.
and for our listeners, a warm fuzzy is what?
So warm fuzzy is like we would have these little post-it notes. Like I'm a post-it note gal. And I would say, okay, right now we're going to say something that we love about Randy. So it's something that is you find endearing or inspiring,
Hmm.
or something that you notice that they did. Is sort of like a way to honor and recognize and celebrate someone in a classroom. And so I would do that with my students. Like every week we would have someone, because it's not, they're student of the month. You can only have 12 students. Well, no, actually 10 students of a month, but you could have,
Hmm.
every student could have a warm fuzzy day. You know what I mean? So there's
Yes.
so many things that I tried and I failed at and then tried and succeeded at that really taught me how to be an educator, where I lead with the heart and I lead with emotion. And then I allow my emotions to guide my practice so that I'm taking care of the whole child, the mind, the spirit, the soul, the body.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And it's, leading with your emotions means you need to have some emotional intelligence, right? You might need some social and emotional learning as an adult.
Hmm.
So, but and here's what we know about you, and one of the reasons why we're so excited to have you on is that you've been a true leader in social emotional learning, and specifically critiquing that sometimes it can be like white supremacy with a hug, or that people use social emotional learning to police Black and brown bodies. And so my question to you is like, how do we pivot from SEL as a behavioral management strategy to a more healing centered practice that actually supports students' mental health?
Thank you for that. I want to thank you. I definitely think that anything we do in education has to have you have to apply criticality to it. So although I say that if you don't apply racial justice lens, if you don't apply an abolitionist lens, anti-bias lens to social emotional learning, it can very easily turn into white supremacy with a hug. I believe that you can take out social emotional learning and put reading and writing, arithmetic, interactions. If you don't have that lens and apply that lens of love, of healing, of care, then there's the risk of being harmful is higher, because we have to understand, obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that our education system can be harmful just as is if we don't come in as educators, as interventions of love, interventions of care, interventions of healing. So when I think about social emotional learning as healing, as liberatory, I think first we start with the genius of the community. I think if we really understand the field of social emotional learning, the question we have to ask the field is, who decided that this was a thing, and who created the competencies? Did they look like me? Did they look like the communities who we're applying it to? What did they have in mind? And what do they hope for SEL to do? And I think it's important for us to understand why are we doing SEL? What is the purpose, right? And I think a lot of schools that I've visited and talked to in the beginning of my career in social emotional learning was using social emotional learning as a way to save Black and brown children from themselves. Like they need to learn how to sit down. And I'm like, we don't talk
Mhm.
about privileged kids that way. We don't talk about white children that way. We just don't. I actually didn't even learn about behavior management until I had to teach an urban environment. I had learned to teach in Vermont, and no one said
Mhm.
anything about behavior management there. So like when I think about like when you ask me this question about SEL, I'm like, wait, how do we apply this criticality to everything we do in education? And so, like I said, we start with the community. We just honor their genius and what they bring, because we can learn from that, and we can learn from our communities to know what they need in order to thrive. And so, like, for example, at Liberate Ed, the organization I founded after leaving Yale, we asked educators what they thought SEL was. We were like, well, who were the experts besides the students and the teachers in the room? So we asked educators, well, what do you think social emotional learning is? And we wrote a paper on that. And we have a new framework for social emotional learning, which includes centering, humanities, using being identity affirming, ensuring that we like center racial justice. So these were all the things that educators came up with. So then we have to ask ourselves, how can we use social emotional learning as a vehicle toward justice, as a vehicle toward healing, toward supporting the mental health of young people and educators and community. And then also we have to, so besides asking the community, we have to build trust. Like if we say something, do it. Because a lot of times what we do in communities, particularly Black and Latinx, Latina communities, is we ask a lot of questions. We give them a lot of surveys, and then we do nothing with what we learn. You can't build trust that way. So if we're going to ask them to tell us their stories and to tell us what they need, then we need to come up with a plan and implement it. And then always ask for feedback and iterate along the way. That's exactly how we built Liberate Ed. Does it take a lot more time? Yes. But it requires this justice work, this healing work, this love work requires that level of time and intentionality. And so for me, I would also say the social emotional learning work requires that time and intentionality. And again, at the core, it's building trusting relationships that allow students to thrive and be their full authentic selves. For me, if you create a classroom that facilitates that, that to me is a classroom where students can feel free.
Thank you. Thank you. So I want to push a little bit on that,
You could
right?
push.
So there's always this balancing act between helping students learn whatever it is they're in school to learn content wise, and the balance of building relationships for however long that they're going to be there. I guess one of the reasons why I call it a push is unpacking this concept of social emotional learning. Like, what are they learning about themselves and each other that is that can help support behaviors that work in the classroom? Put differently, sometimes kids act up, right? I'm not gonna label them. We all
Mhm.
have some adults act up, right?
Right.
And
Everybody be
so,
acting up.
okay, cool. So when we think about, because I hear like these different frameworks for social emotional learning, what is it that we're learning if it's not to control how we act, so we acting right? You get what
Hmm.
I'm getting? Like,
Hmm.
to me, I'm like, it's, I look at the words,
Hmm.
social emotional learning, and I feel like it speaks to an understanding of what's happening with your individual
Emotions.
emotions relative to society, big and small, the social construct of the classroom, society at large. And so how are we teaching this in a way that feels like a healing centered practice, as opposed to teaching it so you either don't get in trouble or in response to when you've been in trouble?
Right,
So can
right.
you just give a little bit more texture as to like the learning part of this? As yeah.
So I think what, an important part of social emotional learning is being able to, be at one with your emotions, right? Identifying your emotions, like expressing your emotions, and also being able to read like emotions in other people. I think
Mhm.
in the US, we tend to think of the individual social emotional learning instead of a collective social emotional learning. That yes, we are in a context, and the context does impact how we can express our emotions, which I'll get to in a moment, or how we sort of experience our emotions. And still we have to be, so the context can impact that, but we also have to be mindful of the other people in the room, right? And
Mhm.
reading their emotions, but also creating space for knowing whether I should share my good news if my friend's having a bad day, right? That is also helpful to know. Like if I know you're going to have a bad day, I'm not going to be like, yo, Misha, I just won the lotto. I need to have a certain
Mhm.
level of awareness, right? So part of that is the awareness
Mhm.
of knowing my friend needs me to be there for her. So I always think of like, how to be a good family member, how to be a good friend as a way to understand like social emotional learning. Like I am going to be a good friend by building trust. Like I'm going to say what I do. I'm going to do what I say. You know what I mean? And I'm going to communicate that I'm going to do it, right? Because some people need communication, especially neurodivergent students, right? We know that they need to know what the plan is, so that they can plan and prepare themselves. I know that a part of that cannot be devoid of my identity and how my identity impacts the way the world experiences my emotionality. And I think for a lot of the social emotional learning programs, that piece is not even honestly discussed. It's sort of like, what identity? Can't we all just breathe? And so, as I think about it happening in the classroom, one clear way for folks to learn is having an educator that's regulated in the classroom who's naming it. They have to know that their teachers have emotions. And like Dana, my twin sister, would be sick, and I would be very hard for me to concentrate, but I know I had to
Mhm.
show up and be there for my students. And I would say, Miss Simmons' sister is sick in the hospital, and I'm really worried about her. So I just wanted to share that with you also, how I'm arriving today. And it created the space for my students to share how they were arriving with me. So part of it was
Mm.
modeling and creating this space for people to share how they are arriving so that we can build and envelop and hug and create the warmth or I mean that was needed or not. um to this day my former students still ask about my twin sister, right? So it was being authentic, sharing enough of yourself, not like obviously all the personal details. It's saying that I feel really distracted, but I'm gonna take some breaths so I could be here and teach you all, or using music and dancing and bringing some joy into the classroom and said, y'all, I want us to be excited about this. I'm going to put on some music," right? So you're actually communicating strategies, right? I want us to be
Mhm.
excited, so I'm going to use music, upbeat, up
Mm.
tempo music, to bring up the energy. When I was in my second year of teaching, see, what had happened was my first year of teaching, I didn't teach after recess, and I was like, teaching is great, I love it. So my second
Uh-huh.
year teaching, I taught after recess, and I said, "What is going on here?" The kids brought all their drama, and I had to come up with a way for my students to be ready to learn, because I was struggling for a bit. And so what we did is I asked my students to create a playlist. So we used music, and I was like, it has to be a low tempo music, something calm. When you, like I said, what do you need when you feel like you need to focus, or when you need to start studying? What are the types of songs you listen to? We had a playlist. Um, I played it low, and they read their own book that was already on their desk for 10 minutes, and the lights were off. And that is how we started the period after lunch every single day. And it allowed me to not spend so much time being like, yo, you sit down, stop chasing that person. What you mean
Mhm.
she hit you at recess, right? All of this drama that they brought. So like all of these strategies I was using. And then but the fact that it was a communication. So I was
Mm.
teaching a social emotional learning program, but I was sharing with them what I was doing, and in that way they were learning. It wasn't like, that's why I'm telling people that you could do, like, learning is social and emotional, right? You
Mm.
when you are teaching literacy and you ask a question, hey, how do you think that character is feeling? What did the author write? What are the details in the writing that the author used for you to say that that person felt rageful? Oh, is it the tension that he said was in the shoulders? So those are the ways that we can do it without even having an SEL program. For example, in math, we know that students typically are anxious before math. For some reason, math is that is inspires a lot of high energy emotions. And so
Hmm.
I would start and I would ask my students to share how they felt before a test. Like, how are you feeling about this test? And they got test corrections. So they knew that if they didn't do well, they had an opportunity to make it better. So there are different ways that I took
Hmm.
care of my students. And that to me was the way I was tending to their emotions, their social lives, but also modeling it and
Mm.
communicating what it was that I was modeling. But it would have been great if I had a social emotional learning program that was awesome. None of them existed, or my school didn't invest in it. But that's what I did with the lack of resources that I had.
Well, listen, thank you.
That was a lot. That was a
Because
lot.
no, it was what we needed, because I think having those concrete examples helps demystify it, number
Mhm.
one. And number two, even hearing more of your journey, okay, you didn't have it, but what we know is that you are creating it for others. So I want to talk more about Liberate Ed. And what we know is that, as I said, a lot of social emotional learning, we both have said, is like geared toward behavioral management, right? Students who are acting out. But we know a lot of students are suffering in silence. So you may not see those factors that would call your attention. So, how do Liberate Ed programs and the initiatives help educators identify students who might be overlooked relative to their mental health needs? The ones who aren't loud, right? But the ones who like have things that they need support around. So, tell us a little bit about the program, about what you all do, and how you all are helping educators help young people who may not be
Awesome.
right on the radar, you know?
Right. Okay. So many ways. So first, I'll start by sharing a story about myself because I am definitely one of those students who suffered in silence, and I still am trying not to do that. You're my friend, so you be having
I
to be like
mean,
Dena.
this is a public podcast, so that's not.
You be like, Dena, get it together.
Mhm.
I'm your friend. You can call me. So I am I'm working on that. But as a young girl, my twin sister became chronically ill in eighth grade. I went to boarding school the following year and, went through that whole experience for 4 years. And, I sent my teacher, one of my high school teachers, like years later, probably when I was in grad school, one of my high school teachers, a gratitude at the thank a teacher, week. I always thank a teacher. So I thought I picked a high school teacher and I told her, like, thank you so much for XYZ. And she was like, I'm so shocked that you're thanking me for this. I assumed that you were doing well. And I was like, and to me, it was like, oh,
Mhm.
a lot of the teachers, because I was quiet, because I behaved, because I had good grades, assumed that I was well. But I lost my best friend to illness, right? Like we weren't partners in crime anymore. Like that was a huge moment in my life where someone should have said, do you need emotional support for that? And so like that personal experience for me, even when I was in the classroom, helped me have awareness of the students that we are like overlook often, right? It's often the kids who are quiet, who pay attention, who do everything as sometimes it's our higher performing students, like I was, right? We just say they're okay, they're fine, they're okay. And I think we need to like get out of that practice of doing that. And so part of what we do at Liberate Ed is we work with teachers. We have a fellowship, we have a national fellowship every year. We're just finalizing our most recent fellowship, so we're excited about that. And now fellowship is an opportunity for teachers to come together. Now, one of the things that we know and realize is that our teachers feel under attack. In the past 3 years of applications, what has come up is the fear that educators are feeling. And so we take care of teachers because we know that when teachers are well and cared for, that their students do better, that there's a correlation between teacher well-being and student well-being. So by just simply taking care of teachers and creating a container of care and love where they can explore and have a community of care and practice is something that without even them changing anything in their practice shifts what is happening in their classroom. Obviously, we go through like we give them some resources that can help them have the types of conversations that allow students to share who they are, build trust, speak to their identities, talk about care and healing. So we do want them to bring it back. And then they engage in a passion project. So the passion project is a concrete way for them to bring back what they've learned based on their community's needs, based on what they know of their communities back to their community. So that is also one way that they can sort of support students, the students who are there, the students who are overlooked. We also just say like, make sure you pay attention to all the students and whatever students you haven't paid attention to, pay attention to them. Sometimes you do have to say that, which reminds us of some other work that we're doing with teachers. We also work with schools and districts. So that's our direct teacher work. We work in school and districts in two ways. And this past year, we worked with 5 schools, which was called in a series called Centering School Student Voice for Sustainable School Transformation. And so students, teachers, and leaders got together to work on a team to come to
Mhm.
based on a on a problem of practice that the students selected.
Mm.
And we taught them how to do a listening tour. And one of the questions that we have is like, okay, you have this data. Now, who was not included in this data? Right. So just having them just think about like, is everyone included? Like just asking that question goes back to when I was teaching. Is everyone, if you're going to pick your own group, make sure no one's left out. It's the same thing. Like, is everyone included in the data? And then how are you welcoming new voices and voices who aren't included in it? And that's the same way you can think about how you support teachers. Is everyone, have I created an opportunity for everyone to share? Have I tried to reach out to every student, build a relationship with them? Because the other part of this is, Misha, is the trust building. Like, even if I
Mhm.
did do it, I don't trust you with my story. I don't trust you with my hard and hurtful feelings, right? So part of it
Mhm.
again is being a reliable, trusting adult to and showing who you are and that you stand on business, because then otherwise it doesn't matter
Mhm.
what you do. If you have, there has to be that trust. We also have a youth leaders program where we work directly with youth, and we sometimes, the way we recruit is like we'll put something on LinkedIn, and then teachers will tell their students, or parents will tell
Mhm.
their children, and we get students who work with them directly to support their mental health and to support their activism, artivism, because some of them are spoken word artists. And just creating a space for students to share their stories allows them to begin to share their stories when they go back to their school buildings. Because one of the things that we realized was something that we're still trying to figure out, is that there's a sort of freedom that our students feel that they can be themselves in a room with other students that don't go to school with them. Right?
Mhm.
The bully, so to speak, isn't in the room with them, right? So they can sort of have the space to explore as well. So we just, what I would say, what we do, and what I would say is first create a container of care and a soft landing place for young people and for anyone really, and build the trust that is necessary for people to share who they are and their stories. So that's what I would say, and we do that in many different ways. We model it, we teach it, we provide
Mhm.
resources, and we create community. And so we treat people the way we want them to treat others.
I love it. No, it's what it brings up for me is just as you're speaking, and particularly this piece around the community that you're creating, is how much mental health is talked about and treated as an individual issue. And so can you speak to like why this collective approach? Like even as you're talking about, the students or the young people and the adults, it seems like core to your work is a community approach, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
even when we're talking about a teacher's healing to impact students. So, first, tell us why that community approach, and then what do you see as that connection? I know you said when the teacher is well that
Mhm.
they, can teach well, but say a little bit more about both the community piece and this connection between a teacher's healing and students being able to learn.
Right. Thank you. I would say that Liberate Ed is built off of the genius of Black folk, of Indigenous folk, and if we and other people of color, right? So if we lean into and we're open to that as our genesis of our foundation, we know and we remember that we heal in community. And so why is everything in community? Because that is how I'm a Black woman. That is how I heal. And so I'm bringing that genius, but also my ancestors healed in community. And what I know of other of ancestors that are not related to me healed in community. So that's partially why that's why we do it. Uh, and that's why that's the basis of our work. We describe ourselves as a collective because we're not going to heal alone. I always tell people like, oh, I could do as an educator, right? Or as someone who works somewhere, I can do all the things that I need to do, right? I could do Zen yoga, I could meditate, I could go to acupuncture, I could go for my walk, and then still show up at a toxic environment, which is where I work. So everybody needs to be part of the healing and the care. Otherwise, it's like it's like I'm gonna keep doing this and it's a rat wheel situation because I don't have the support or the conditions for I don't have the conditions for healing. I don't have the network for healing. I don't have
Mhm.
anything that supports my healing journey, right? Even though I'm doing my individual healing. And plus it's a very US centric way to be so individual focused. And I'm a woman raised by a Caribbean mother who's Black and who grew up in the Bronx around Puerto Ricans and Dominicans who looked out for me. Like I know nothing happens without community. And so that's the genius that we bring. So that's part of why we do it. And when we think about teachers um, and how their well-being sort of influences students' well-being is that we know when teachers are stressed. We know from research that when teachers are stressed and burnt out, just think about the types of interactions they're having. Those
Mhm.
interactions are less warm. Like even think about when you're stressed, right? And you come home and you got like boo home, right? And
Mhm.
there's like your fuse is shorter, right? And so like if you're stressed
Mhm.
out and burnt out and your fuse is shorter and a student does a minor mistake, you might blow it up, right? And so that's why it's important because a regulated teacher is a very important role in the classroom. When a dysregulated teacher is like, ooh, right? Again, teachers are modeling through their own behavior. We also know
Mhm.
that if those interactions are not as warm with the teacher because of teacher stress and burnout, that the classroom climate is going to suffer, right? Because
Mhm.
now the kids are like, ooh, should I say something? Right? There's a fear that they have. We know also that emotions are contagious, right? So if I'm stressed and I'm fearful and I'm anxious, students will pick up on that and they might feel anxious. They may not know why they feel anxious, but they're picking up on that energy. And when teachers are stressed and burnt out, we also know that students academics don't do as well academically, right? So I always push and I say we have to take care of our teachers, which is what you do with the Black Teacher Project, which is what we do with Liberate Ed's fellowship, is we take care of teachers because we know our ancestral knowledge tells us, but also what we know from studies is that when we take care of the community and the people in the community, that the whole community does well.
Thank you. Thank you. At BTP, we talk about self and community care, right? Because we need both. Some folks are, perhaps I'm talking to myself in this moment, but some folks are focused on taking care of the community and then they're not taking care of themselves.
Hmm.
But I'm going to move on to the next question because I
That
feel
sounds like you're
like,
talking. It sounds like you
no,
calling me in.
no,
It sounds
this
like you
is
calling me in.
what happens when you get off script. I got to stay focused though. But I really appreciate you speaking to that balance of both. And so much criticism comes to social emotional learning in this political moment. because it is not seen as important as, traditional content. Meanwhile, we lived through a whole pandemic, and there was a moment where we got reconnected to our humanity
Mm.
as larger communities. And, I don't wish that suffering on us, but I do wish that connection to return. So there it is.
Yes.
Um, I want to talk about um, story and writing. I've heard you speak many times. I've read your work, and you often emphasize the power of voice, right? How does giving students the tools to write their own story, literally or figuratively, act as like a protective factor for their mental health? Or what is it about young people writing their story that can support their mental health?
So, what we've learned from our young people is that they get so excited telling their stories, right? So, our youth leaders program is an opportunity, right? Students, learn a specific concept about mental health, about doing somatic exercises and what have you. But part of it is for them telling their stories. And so I remember we had a moment where a student was talking about, he went to a predominantly white institution, private school for high school. He talked about how his student body got together to push back to the school for not protecting Black students. And then you just saw as soon as he finished that, all the students were like, oh, I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know that was possible. So one
Mm,
way is that it opens up the realm of possibility, right? When I tell my
mm,
story, I'm like, oh, that can happen. That that's what? Right? So one is that opens up the realm of possibility. Two, it's sort of like, oh, you as well, right? So there's this I'm not alone piece, right? So it builds
mhm,
community because now I have something in common with you. After you've shared your story, I found a piece of myself in you, right? So there's a connection. It builds connection because now I see something in common with you. Three, that commonality piece in knowing that you're not alone supports your mental health because you're like, I
mm,
have a community to do this with. I'm not the only one because a lot of times, especially in our current moment, our young people feel very lonely. And so if a story helps you feel less lonely, then we are doing something right. And then I think the act of telling the story, you learn more about yourself, right? And so you can build awareness. And then in the act of hearing another person's story, you also build social awareness. You're like, oh, I can, I'm kind of more aware of the people who are sharing this community with me. Now I know something about them. And so to me, I think story is a big piece of it. And then especially for Black folk, for Indigenous folk, for BIPOC folk, is that too often our stories are told for us. And there is so much that is left out about us because the people who told the story is only going to tell the story in a way that benefits them. So they either present themselves as the savior to our stories or present us as in need of some intervention. So it's
mm,
empowering to tell our own story. So just the act of being able to direct your story and to say, this is mine, you don't get to tell it from me, does support mental health because now I'm empowered to share to use my voice and share my story. And then also last, story as advocacy, right? How can
mhm,
you use story to advocate for yourself and to do the activism work that is part of a lot of justice movements. So I think, you know, last story allows us to see someone's full humanity, right? So numbers
mhm,
are important, but we also need to be connected to the person. You can move someone's heart and mind with a story.
mm.
And so I
As
would
you
say,
have, you stay telling stories.
mm,
If anyone has seen your TED Talks, like, there it is, right? It's what helps us connect to ideas. And so I appreciate you breaking that down. And just this idea of connection. like I said, we lived through this moment. We know connection is important. Um, we're also dealing with the system of schooling, which is more often about compliance. And so schools choose compliance over connection. And I think those of us who are into this liberation work want to interrupt that. And so I'm curious what you see as possible. One, how you think about what liberation is. Like you named your organization Liberate Ed. So I'm guessing liberation is important to you. So first and foremost, how do you understand even just this concept and this practice of liberation? But then also, what becomes possible for young people when they experience learning in that way, as opposed to simply compliance?
Right, right. And also, we just have to even add some nuance there that when we're talking about this, the system of schooling, the system of schooling harms BIPOC youth the most. It harms student with
Mhm.
learning differences the most. It harms students on the LGBTQI plus spectrum, like you know what I mean, with those
Mhm.
identities the most. So we don't this some students get a great education, right? They get to explore, they get sports, they can do experiments, they have the resources for that. So there is great
Mhm.
education happening in our country. It's just not equitably distributed, right? And
Mm,
so
mm, mm. Wait,
so
hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, hold on, right there. Just hold on right there. Because the narrative is that the education in this country is just terrible, terrible, terrible. And I just want to appreciate this point that some folks are getting that good, but not everybody. Please continue. I just needed to
and
have
and
a little
and that's
moment
the
there.
challenge, right? Because that's color coded. There's only a
Hmm.
few of us who get access to great education. A few of us, when I say
Hmm.
us, I mean those of us who have been pushed to the margins, right? Any of those
Yes.
identities, right? And and that's a problem, right? Because then what it does, it stratifies our
Hmm.
society to who has access to living a full life and who has access to not being worried about where they live and paying for rent and all of those things, because all of that impacts how you learn. Because trust and believe, if you're worried about where you have to live, you are not worried about 2 plus 5, right? It's just like that
Hmm.
there's just some things that are more important to worry about, and school is the least of it when you're worried about whether you're going to eat or whether you're going to sleep somewhere, right? And so I think that knowledge is important for educators. Is how do we think about the whole child and what they're bringing to school and what they're holding and what they're carrying, so we can support them. Uh, I forgot your question. Like once I got into it, I forgot your question.
Yeah, no, no. I was asking about like your understanding of liberation
Okay,
and what
liberation.
becomes possible for young people when they experience learning as liberation instead
Right,
of
right, right,
compliance.
right,
Because right now it's do what I say. Follow
right,
the
and
rule. Follow the rule. If you got to learn how to follow the rules and learn how to do this work to be successful.
right, and
Compliance, compliance,
that is
compliance.
true. Compliance, compliance. Well, one, two. So I would say there are several things. One is that we have, even for school students who get great education, I would say this is true for a lot of young people, which is that we have a very narrow definition of success. That success is tied to capitalism, it's tied to like being the top, it's tied to going to the best school, it's just tied to making a lot of money, it's tied to working a lot of hours and not resting and just, win, 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 and all the ways that you can win, right? House, car, all of these materialistic things. And at the end of the day, I'm sure when someone is on their deathbed, they're not saying, oh, I wish I had another car. I wish that's what I would have done with my life, that I just got that Maserati, right? They're likely saying, I wish I spent more time with my family. And so for me, I think we have to expand our definition of success to include the community, that I treated people with care, that I created spaces where people felt proud to be exactly who they are, that I was able to be my full authentic self, and that I created the conditions for that wherever I went, that I made time to learn things that I love. I didn't realize, like, for me, that was me. I'm telling you, I was guilty. I had a very like not liberated education. Like my education was, how do I get to the next thing? And it wasn't until I was on leave from Yale that I took a class at Harvard, and I was auditing the class. And it was actually my seventh grade teacher who was teaching that class. Clearly, she wasn't my seventh grade teacher anymore, but we have relationships are important. I do my best to like maintain them. Anyway, so I took the class. And what I realized was the first time I like truly enjoyed a class because I wasn't worried about grade. Right? I wasn't worried about this narrow definition of success. Like part of the success has to be, did I enjoy this learning? Did I
Mm-hmm.
enjoy this class? Did it spark something, inspire something in me for further learning instead of just check the box and take the next class that you need for your major or you need for graduation or you need community
Mm-hmm.
service. I'm like, you're doing things for the sake of doing them instead of the sake of joyful. And I think joy is part of liberation. I think
Mm-hmm.
um having a space where you could show up as you are is in liberation as well. And like for me, there was pieces of it like that were liberation, which was like, you know, education to open doors for me. And because those doors are open, I'm able to be where I am today. So there was a liberating piece of education. I also know our ancestors and Black people care so much about education because we know it's tied to our liberation. We know
Mm-hmm.
that the learning, the knowledge of knowing more makes us better advocates for our and makes us better voters. Like all of these things impact like education, and having a liberated education allows us to impact policy, allows us to advocate for ourselves in the hospitals and in healthcare. It allows us to stand up for ourselves when we feel like we're
Mm-hmm.
not getting the what we need and what we deserve and what we're entitled to. It allows facilitates so much things that we can do that allow us to live freely, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, you did. I mean, I think, when we bring it back to students and we think about what's possible for them with liberation, you've named it, right? It is this engagement in society that's different. And if we're measuring success beyond capitalism, then liberatory education speaks to how are we free and not
Right.
just free from. I think sometimes when we talk about freedom, it's consistently inside of like social and political oppression. There's also a freedom that's inherent in our humanity, independent of what political or economic conditions we're in. And
Right.
that's what I really took from what you
Right. And then
shared.
one more piece of it too that I think is that, I went back to talking about the person, what they wish for on their deathbed, that they rested more, that they took the time to sit they ass down. You know what I mean? Because there's always gonna be work, Bisha, but we gonna have to sit our asses down
Why
and
are
be
you
still.
putting my business on the podcast? This is no more friends on the podcast. I have one final question for you, where you put all my business in the street.
I love you,
It's,
boo.
I love you too. Oh, well, at the Black Teacher Project, we support Black teachers across this country, and we know that Black educators are often the ones carrying the emotional weight of their students. And so, for that educator who's listening, who's exhausted, even though it's the summer, who might be teaching summer school to get that coin or doing whatever, right? As they're trying to tend to the students' needs while they're trying to just deal with their own empty cup, what is one soul care or liberatory practice that they can lean into today? What's something that the Black educator could do to start to fill that cup?
Get your 8 hours of sleep. Get yourself one of these like technology things and set a bedtime and create a bedtime routine because you need to get enough sleep so that you are a regulated classroom because you know that that is a gift to yourself and to your students because if you get enough sleep. And then if you can, right, if you have the ability to move your body, right? There is something about moving our body and how it supports with the feelings of exhaustion. So I would say get on a sleep schedule, get your 8 hours, drink your water, move your body, and don't do it alone. Like if you need an accountability friend to say, "Hey, did you get your 8 hours or seven?" Start with seven. That is like you're my account. You're one of my OG accountability buddies, like Misha. Like you are
Mhm.
part of my healing journey. You are part of my care journey. Because you asked all the questions. You're like, sis, you said that you were gonna be out of here at this time, and you are still here. And so sometimes you need a friend like Misha. So get you a friend like Misha too.
Well, I would say get you a friend like Dena, Dr. Dena Simmons. Thank you so
Dr.
much.
Misha.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk and share your brilliance. The organization is Liberate Ed. The website is liberatedsel.com. Check them out, support. That donate button always works.
For both
And
of us.
thank you for both of us. And thank you so, so much for taking the time. And to all of our listeners, thank you for joining us on the Black Teacher Project podcast. We hope today's conversation has fed your spirit, affirmed your journey, and reminded you that you are not alone. We are right here. You can stay in the loop with the Black Teacher Project for resources, gatherings, and ways to build alongside others who are committed to creating communities of liberated learning for all students. You can find us at www.blackteacherproject.org. Follow us on all the things: Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Threads at Black Teacher Project. Until next time, take care of yourself and your people. Thank you so much.